The night of the gala shimmered with the illusion of perfection. Strings of white lights hung from the trees like captured stars, guiding guests toward the grand entrance of Brookhaven Town Hall. The marble steps gleamed, polished to the kind of shine that made people forget what those same stones once stood for. Aisha pulled up in her modest gray sedan, the hum of laughter and music drifting through her open window. Men in tuxedos and women in gowns floated past security ropes, their voices lilting with old Southern charm. She sat for a moment, her hands resting lightly on the steering wheel, listening to the rhythm of her heartbeat against the muffled jazz spilling from inside. Malik had begged to come, but she told him no, not this time. "This one's for grown folks and ghosts," she'd said with a soft smile. He didn't understand the weight of that. Not yet. Stepping out, Aisha smoothed the wrinkles from her gown and adjusted the small silver pin on her chest, the one that read U.S. Air Force veteran. It wasn't about vanity. It was a reminder, a quiet truth she carried like a shield. At the entrance, 2 uniformed security guards stood behind a velvet rope. One of them, Dan Rourke, tall, broad, and pale as the marble steps, scanned invitations with the kind of precision that looked like habit. His radio crackled at his belt. Aisha approached with a composed smile, invitation in hand. "Good evening. I'm here for the Brookhaven Civic Gala. Aisha Grant." Rourke took the envelope, glanced at it, then at her. His eyes flicked from her face to her gown, to the modest clutch she carried. "Ma'am," he said, voice smooth but cool, "this entrance is for VIP guests only." Her smile didn't waver. "I'm one of the honorees this evening. I believe my name should be on the list." He turned to the clipboard, flipping through pages slowly. "Don't see it here. May I check? It should be under the Veterans Association." The morning light slipped through the lace curtains and washed the kitchen in a soft gold. Aisha Grant stood by the window, stirring a pot of oatmeal, her robe loosely tied, steam fogging the glass. Outside, the street was quiet, the kind of southern stillness that carried both peace and memory. Her father, Henry, sat at the table, polishing his old watch with the care of a man who understood the worth of time. Malik, her 17-year-old son, leaned over a stack of college brochures, headphones slung around his neck, head bobbing to a rhythm she couldn't hear but recognized, the sound of youth and forward motion. "Mom, did you know Tuskegee has a full scholarship for veterans' kids?" he said without looking up. Aisha smiled faintly. "I know, baby. I used to brief pilots who trained there." Henry chuckled, deep and warm. "Your mama could fly circles around half the Air Force." She shot him a look, half embarrassment, half pride. That part of her life felt like another country now. She traded her uniform for counseling sessions, her rank for compassion. After 20 years serving as a psychological operations officer, she'd returned home to Brookhaven, a small Mississippi town where everyone knew everyone's business, but not everyone's truth. Her counseling office was tucked inside an old church-turned community center. The walls were covered with children's drawings and faded quotes about hope. She met veterans who carried invisible wounds, teenagers teetering on the edge of despair, mothers who couldn't afford therapy but came anyway, just to talk. Aisha listened more than she spoke. She'd learned that silence, real silence, could disarm pain better than pity ever could. In town, people respected her, mostly, but even respect came with an edge. The polite nods at the grocery store, the slightly longer stares at the bank, the "you speak so well" comments from folks who thought they were complimenting her. She learned to let those things roll off early. "Mom, that's huge." Malik grinned, his pride so pure it ached. She smiled, though her eyes softened with caution. "It's just a dinner, sweetheart." Henry looked up, one eyebrow raised. In this town, ain't no such thing as just a dinner. He wasn't wrong. Brookhaven had a long history of dressing up its prejudice in politeness. The gala would be held at Town Hall, the marble building that once barred black voters from entering. The same hall where Henry had once been told to wait outside, while white mechanics signed contracts his hands had built. Still, Aisha decided to go, not out of pride, but principle. She wanted her son to see that you could stand in any room with your head held high, even if the room wasn't built for you. That night, she laid out her dress, a deep navy gown, simple but elegant. Malik offered to iron it, his fingers careful around the fabric. Henry watched from the armchair, eyes wet with quiet admiration. "You're doing right, baby girl," he said. "You walk in there with grace. Make him remember your name." Aisha nodded. "I don't need them to remember my name, Daddy. Just what dignity looks like." When she finally stepped outside, the air was thick with the scent of magnolia and humidity. She glanced up at the town skyline, modest, aging, proud, and took a slow breath. The wind brushed her braids against her shoulders, whispering something she couldn't quite name. In her reflection on the car window, she saw both the soldier she'd been and the woman she'd become. Composed, prepared. She didn't know that before the night was over, the quiet strength she'd built her life upon would be tested. Not in war, but in the heart of her own hometown. The town that had once saluted her would soon try to humiliate her. And Aisha Grant, steady as stone, would meet it with the kind of power they didn't understand. Rourke sighed, irritation flashing across his features. "Ma'am, I'm just telling you what's here. You'll need to step aside while we sort this out." She stepped back, feeling the eyes on her. A couple walking past gave her a polite, puzzled glance, the kind reserved for people who looked out of place. She stood straight, chin lifted, the faint hum of a jazz saxophone rolling out from the ballroom like a taunt. Then came the voice, sharp and perfumed with disdain. "Is there a problem?" A white woman in a sequin gown approached, her diamond bracelet catching the light. Lauren Pierce, the mayor's sister. Everyone in Brookhaven knew her, her charity galas, her influence, her smile that never reached her eyes. Rourke straightened immediately. "Evening, Mrs. Pierce." Lauren's gaze landed on Aisha, assessing. "You must understand, these events have specific guest tiers," she said, her tone dripping civility. "We can't just let anyone wander into the VIP section." Aisha met her gaze evenly. "I was invited. I'd be happy to wait while you verify that." Lauren smiled, a blade wrapped in sugar. "Of course. Security's just doing their job." She turned and waltzed inside without another glance, her perfume lingering like insult. The humiliation pressed in, slow and suffocating. Aisha could feel the shift in the air, the silent judgments, the unspoken assumptions. Someone whispered behind her, "Maybe she's staff." Aisha's pulse steadied. Years in the military had taught her to breathe through insult, to turn heat into stillness. She clasped her hands in front of her, eyes fixed on the double doors where laughter spilled out, carrying with it the brittle sound of privilege. Minutes passed. Rourke fiddled with his radio. "Yeah, got a woman here. Says she's invited. Name's Grant. Uh-huh. Black female, early 40s. The words landed like stones. Black female, early 40s. Not veteran, not honoree, just a description, a reduction." When the response came, his expression didn't change. "Sorry, ma'am. No record of your name on the list." She exhaled slowly, the air trembling at her lips. "Could you please call the event coordinator? I have my email confirmation right here." He shook his head. "You'll have to move to the lobby, ma'am. You're blocking the entrance." The murmur of guests thickened. Curiosity, pity, avoidance. Somewhere in the crowd, a young woman lifted her phone, recording discreetly. The lens caught everything. The calm in Aisha's face, the coldness in his. When the officer from across the steps began to approach, hand resting on his holster, Aisha knew the familiar rhythm, the choreography of intimidation. She didn't flinch, didn't raise her voice. She simply held out her phone, showing the email stamped with the mayor's seal. "Here," she said evenly. "This is my invitation." The officer glanced at Rourke, then back at her. "Ma'am, you'll need to come with me until we get this cleared." Aisha looked at him, and then past him into the ballroom's glittering doorway, where people danced under chandeliers that reflected her exclusion. "Understood," she said quietly. "But you should know, I've spent half my life defending this country's right to fairness. Tonight, I'm only asking for the same." The officer hesitated, but the cameras were already rolling, the whispers already spreading. By the time she was escorted outside, the night air had turned heavy. Her reflection in the glass door caught her, still standing tall, even as the doors closed between her and the world that claimed to honor her. She didn't know it yet, but the footage of that moment would find its way across screens before sunrise, igniting a fire Brookhaven hadn't seen in decades. By morning, the town had already chosen its sides. The video, shaky, grainy, captured through the glow of someone's phone, had made its way onto every local feed before sunrise. Aisha Grant standing at the entrance of the gala, composed and silent, while two white men blocked her path. The caption beneath it read simply, "Local veteran denied entry to Civic Gala. Ma'am, this area is for VIPs." At first, it was just whispers. Then came the comments. Then came the outrage. By the time Aisha walked into her counseling office that Monday, her face was already on the news. Her students stared at her from the hallway, some with awe, others with confusion. She moved quietly, her heels clicking against the linoleum, her eyes fixed ahead. The air felt heavier now, every look charged with something unsaid. In her office, she closed the door and sat for a long moment in silence. The blinds filtered the morning sun into soft, golden stripes across her desk. Her phone buzzed, text after text from friends, colleagues, even strangers. Some messages were furious, others kind, others just curious. Her colleague, Mrs. Patterson, peeked in. "You all right, honey?" Aisha nodded. "I'm fine. You see the mayor's statement?" She hadn't. Patterson handed her a printout from a news site. Aisha scanned the words. "The Brookhaven Civic Committee deeply regrets any misunderstanding that occurred at our event. Mrs. Grant was not listed among registered attendees. We respect her service to our nation and hope this unfortunate mix-up can be resolved amicably." Unfortunate mix-up. She let the paper fall onto her desk. The phrasing was deliberate, polished, sanitized, false. The kind of language designed to smother truth beneath etiquette. A knock on the door pulled her from her thoughts. It was a student, a boy she'd counseled through panic attacks, his small frame barely filling the doorway. "Miss Grant," he said quietly, "they were wrong for that." She smiled faintly. "Thank you, baby. You focus on your grades, all right." He nodded, but his eyes held the kind of loyalty that no public apology could erase. By afternoon, reporters began circling the community center. Local stations parked their vans across the street, cameras aimed like questions. Aisha declined interviews, her voice steady. No comment at this time. She wasn't ready to speak. Not yet. That evening, she drove home past the town hall, the same marble steps glowing under the streetlights, now littered with discarded programs and empty champagne bottles. On the door hung a single poster, "Thank you to our honored guests." Her name wasn't among them. Inside her house, Malik sat hunched over his phone, anger etched deep in his young face. "Mom, this video's got 1 million views. People are furious. They're saying you were profiled." Aisha set down her bag, her expression unreadable. "And what do you think? I think they embarrassed you. You should go on TV. Tell them who you are. Tell them you worked intelligence. They'll back down." She shook her head gently. "That's not how this works." "Then how does it work?" His voice cracked. "They get to humiliate you, and you just let them?" She turned to him, calm as stone. "Sometimes the loudest answer is silence, Malik. Let them talk. Let the truth breathe." He wanted to argue, but something in her eyes stopped him. Later that night, as the house settled into stillness, Aisha sat at her desk scrolling through comments she didn't ask for. Some called her brave. Others called her a liar. But one comment from a woman she didn't know lingered in her mind. "We're watching, Miss Grant. Don't let them bury this." She closed her laptop and looked toward the folded flag on her bookshelf, the one given to her when her husband died in service. Her hand trembled slightly as she reached for it. In the dim light, her reflection in the window looked older, sharper, resolute. They thought they had humiliated her. They didn't understand. Humiliation was temporary. Truth was patient. By morning, Brookhaven would wake to find its polite facade cracking. The story wasn't dying down. It was just beginning to breathe. The night pressed down heavy on Brookhaven, a slow, suffocating quiet that came after too much noise. Aisha sat at her kitchen table, The hum of the refrigerator, the only sound in the room. The day's headlines had multiplied, shifting from local gossip to national curiosity. Her name, her face, her stillness at those marble steps, they had all become symbols now. Some people called her the calm veteran. Others called her the troublemaker. Both missed the truth. Across from her, Malik scrolled endlessly through his phone, his anger raw, uncontained. They're calling you a liar, Mom, saying you showed up uninvited, that you were trying to start something. Aisha didn't answer. Her gaze stayed fixed on the table, where a cup of untouched tea had gone cold. In her silence, the weight of years of service, loss, and quiet endurance seemed to. When she finally spoke, her voice was measured, low. Do you know what they used to call me back in the service? Malik looked up, confused. No, the quiet strategist. She smiled faintly. I wasn't the loudest in the room, but I always saw the pattern before the chaos began. She rose and crossed to the cabinet in the corner, the one she never opened. From it, she pulled a slim metal box. Inside, wrapped in faded cloth, were her military commendations, photos, and a folder marked confidential, USAF Intelligence Division. Malik's eyes widened. You were in intelligence? For 20 years, she said softly. I specialized in psychological operations, information control, counterpropaganda, influence strategy. She met his gaze. My job was to understand how people twist truth to control perception. I know that game better than they do. Malik leaned forward. So, what are you going to do? Aisha's eyes glinted with something he hadn't seen before. Not anger, but purpose. I'm going to show them what integrity looks like under pressure. She opened her laptop. For hours, she worked, collecting evidence, cross-referencing names, piecing together timelines. The invitation email. The Veterans Association's registration list. Screenshots of the mayor's press statement. Every detail became part of a pattern. Her military training clicked back into place, each move calculated, precise. At dawn, she called an old contact, Major Tom Barrett, a retired legal advisor now working with veteran advocacy groups. He answered on the second ring, his voice gravelly with sleep. Grant? Haven't heard that name in a while. It's been years, Tom. I need a favor. She laid out everything. The event, the statement, the doctored guest list. He listened in silence. When she finished, there was a pause, then a low whistle. They picked the wrong woman to try this on. I'll put you in touch with a legal team, folks who handle discrimination cases for vets. Keep everything documented. No emotion, no commentary. Just truth. That day, she returned to the community center as if nothing had changed. Her students greeted her with hesitant smiles. The town's air was charged now, half admiration, half resentment. Outside, news vans lined the street. Inside, she carried herself the same as always, calm, measured, unbroken. Around noon, she found a letter slipped under her office door. No return address, typed neatly on white paper. For the sake of Brookhaven's image, we suggest you refrain from making further public appearances. Things could get difficult. She read it once, folded it neatly, and placed it in her drawer. She'd seen intimidation before, in war zones, from enemies who hid behind symbols of authority. The tactic was the same. Create fear, isolate the target, control the story. But fear had no place left to grow in her. That evening, she stood in front of her mirror, straightening the medals she hadn't worn in years. Her reflection was steady, eyes lit by something fierce and quiet. They think silence means surrender, she whispered. They've never met someone who uses silence as a weapon. From the next room, Malik's voice called softly. You're not going to let them get away with it, are you? She smiled faintly. No, baby. I'm just letting them walk into their own trap. Outside, thunder rolled over Brookhaven, low, distant, inevitable. By the time morning came, the first cracks in the mayor's story would appear. The town was about to learn who Aisha Grant really was, and that the woman they tried to humiliate had come prepared for war of a very different kind. The first headline hit national television on a Thursday morning. Air Force veteran turned away from civic gala. Mayor's office under fire. By noon, The story had spread across every major network in the South. Clips of Aisha standing calmly before the velvet rope played on a loop. Her poise, her quiet dignity, the firm set of her shoulders. Commentators debated her expression as if it were a riddle. Was she angry? Defiant? Graceful? Everyone had an opinion, but no one could quite name the truth. That what they were seeing wasn't performance. It was control. Inside her counseling office, the phone rang nonstop. Some callers offered prayers. Others wanted to use her image for their causes. Aisha ignored most of them, choosing instead to focus on her students. The youngest ones clung to her in the hallways, whispering, "We saw you on TV, Miss Grant. You looked brave." She smiled softly. Brave is just another word for calm when everyone else is losing it. By afternoon, national reporters began arriving in Brookhaven. The small town's main street transformed into a circus of microphones, lights, and long lenses. Local businesses divided. The diner owner who'd served Aisha for years now turned his face away when she walked past, while the librarian slipped a note in her hand that read, "We're proud of you. Don't let them rewrite this." The mayor's office released another statement, more polished this time, dripping with carefully chosen regret. "We deeply value our veterans. Unfortunately, there was an administrative oversight. Mrs. Grant's invitation appears to have been lost in transmission. We asked for privacy as we addressed this matter internally." But then came the leak. A young journalist named Tara Jenkins, working for a small online outlet called the Southern Ledger, received an anonymous tip: internal emails between Mayor Pierce's assistant and event security. The messages revealed that Aisha's name had been intentionally removed from the VIP list after questions about optics. Tara verified the emails twice before publishing. Her article went live at 2:17 p.m. By 4 o'clock, it had exploded. Aisha's phone buzzed relentlessly. She opened the article, her breath catching as she read the words that confirmed what she'd suspected. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was design, a deliberate act meant to humiliate her quietly, under the soft cover of bureaucracy. That evening, she finally agreed to one interview. It wasn't with a network giant or a political journalist. It was with Tara. They met at the community center after closing, the air thick with the hum of old fluorescent lights. Tara was young, nervous, and earnest, her camera trembling slightly as she set it up. "I don't want to sensationalize this," Tara said, adjusting her mic. "I just want people to understand who you are." Aisha nodded. "Then let's give them the truth." When the camera light turned red, her expression didn't change. "I served this country for 20 years, she said evenly. "I've seen what power looks like up close. It doesn't always wear a uniform. Sometimes it wears a smile. What happened to me at that gala wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a mirror, and a lot of people didn't like what it reflected." Tara swallowed hard. "What do you want, Mrs. Grant?" "Accountability," Aisha said. "Not revenge, not apology, just accountability." When the interview aired, it resonated deeper than the outrage before it. People shared her words across platforms, quoting them like scripture. Churches invited her to speak. Veteran organizations offered support. Civil rights groups began planning peaceful rallies outside Brookhaven Town Hall. Through a network of allies that had grown since the interview, lawyers, journalists, veterans, Aisha began building her case. She didn't just want an apology. She wanted a paper trail. Every deleted email, every whispered directive, every lost invitation that proved intent. Her contact in D.C., Colonel Dana Lewis, a former commanding officer turned civil rights attorney, offered advice through encrypted calls. "Don't play defense," Dana told her. "Build your timeline. Get them to contradict themselves. They'll crumble under their own arrogance." And they did. Slowly. The first crack came from the security guard who denied her entry that night. His name was Franklin Boyd, a man in his 50s with kind eyes that hadn't stopped apologizing since the incident. One evening, he knocked on her office door after closing hours. "I can't sleep," he said. "They told me to turn you away, Miss Grant. Said you were not authorized for the guest list. I knew it was wrong. Do you have proof?" she asked gently. He nodded, sliding a folded piece of paper from his coat pocket, a printed directive from the event coordinator's office. marked with the mayor's initials. I kept this. Don't ask me why. Maybe because my mama raised me better than that. Aisha's hands trembled as she took the page. You just gave this town its truth, she whispered. Within days, her legal team filed a formal discrimination complaint with the state's Civil Rights Commission. The mayor's office tried to bury it under procedural delays, but Aisha anticipated every move. For every denial, she produced documentation. For every smear attempt, she countered with composure and clarity. On local talk shows, city officials painted her as bitter, overreacting, even ungrateful. Aisha never raised her voice once. Instead, she released the documents, in sequence, methodically, like chapters in a book she'd already written. By week 3, the national press had picked up the story again. This time, the tone had shifted. No longer was it about a veteran humiliated at a gala. It was about institutional exclusion, about how easily power manipulated perception. One night, Aisha sat at her kitchen table with stacks of folders and a cup of untouched coffee. Henry leaned in the doorway, arms crossed. You ever get tired of being the calm one? She smiled faintly. Every day. But that's the job. He nodded, his voice thick with pride. You're your mother's daughter. She fought in her own way, too. Aisha glanced at the wall, where a framed photograph of her late mother, a schoolteacher turned civil rights marcher, hung. I know, she said softly. She taught me how to fight without fists. The next morning, Aisha and her team submitted a federal inquiry request to the Department of Justice, citing systemic racial discrimination within Brookhaven's local government. Her attorney, Dana Lewis, stood beside her at the courthouse steps as reporters gathered. Today isn't about vengeance, Dana told them. It's about exposure. The truth doesn't need to shout to be heard. Aisha took the microphone next. The autumn wind caught her hair, sunlight gleaming across her face. For years, people like me have been told to stay quiet, to take the insult and move on. But silence has never kept anyone safe. It's only kept the powerful comfortable. That ends today. The cameras clicked. Her words traveled farther than she could have imagined. Behind closed doors, in the mayor's office, panic simmered. Staff deleted messages. Advisors quit. Donors withdrew. What had once been a simple act of exclusion had now become a scandal reaching federal attention. And Aisha, calm, deliberate, unshaken, sat at her desk, waiting. The storm was no longer coming. It had already arrived. The day of the hearing dawned gray and cold, the kind of morning that felt heavy before the first word was spoken. Brookhaven's courthouse stood at the center of town, old brick, faded flags, and columns that had seen decades of ceremonies and secrets. For the first time in its history, national cameras lined its steps. Inside, the crowd buzzed with nervous anticipation. Town officials filled the front rows, stiff and defensive. Reporters whispered near the back, microphones poised. The mayor sat at the defense table, jaw tight, his attorney whispering frantically in his ear. Across the aisle, Aisha Grant sat calm and composed, a folder of documents before her, her father Henry on one side, and Dana Lewis on the other. When the judge entered, the room fell into a silence so deep it pressed against the walls. Dana began the opening statement. Her voice was firm but restrained, the controlled cadence of a soldier who'd traded command for courtroom precision. This case is not about a misunderstanding, she said. It's about deliberate exclusion, about an act meant to humiliate a woman who served her country, not because she was uninvited, but because of what she represented. She paused, letting the words sink in. Power doesn't always announce itself with force. Sometimes it hides behind clipboards, policies, and polite smiles. But the effect is the same: exclusion, diminishment, erasure. All eyes turned to Aisha. She didn't flinch. The defense tried to spin their narrative, that the invitation had been misplaced, that no intent to discriminate existed, that the mayor had personally apologized and even offered to honor Mrs. Grant at a future event. Dana smiled faintly, almost pitying. Intent, she repeated, pacing slowly, is often written in the shadows. Then she nodded to the bailiff. We'd like to enter Exhibit 12 into evidence. On the screen behind her, a series of emails appeared, the internal correspondence between the mayor's office and security staff. The words glowed in sterile white light, each one undeniable. Let's keep the guest list clean this year. Too many activists from the community last time. Don't need any more diversity optics. It sends the wrong message to donors. Gasps rippled through the room. The mayor's attorney tried to object, but the judge overruled him. Aisha sat perfectly still, her hands folded, her face unreadable. Inside, her heartbeat thundered in her ears. For months, she had fought this battle quietly, methodically, and now the truth was exposed, undeniable for all to see. Then Dana called the final witness, Franklin Boyd, the security guard who had been ordered to deny Aisha entry. Franklin took the stand, voice trembling at first, but steadying as he spoke. They told me to stop her at the door, he said. Said she wasn't on the list. I knew who she was. Everyone in this town does. I asked if they were sure, and they said, yes, we don't want any surprises tonight. He hesitated, eyes glistening. I followed orders that night, but I've regretted it every day since. When he finished, the silence was suffocating. Aisha rose slowly from her seat. Dana looked at her, unsure if she would speak. The judge gave a small nod. Mrs. Grant, would you like to address the court? Aisha stepped forward, the click of her heels echoing through the courtroom. She faced the mayor, not with anger, but with something deeper. Resolve. I spent 20 years defending this country, she said, her voice steady. I've seen men lie, cheat, and break laws in the name of power. But I've also seen truth break through the darkest kind of silence. What happened to me isn't just about one night. It's about a system that believes dignity is a privilege instead of a right. Her gaze swept the room. I didn't come here for revenge. I came here so that the next woman who served her country won't have to fight this same fight in her own hometown. When she finished, no one moved. Even the judge's face softened. Cameras clicked in hushed rhythm, capturing the quiet aftermath of a reckoning. That evening, news outlets across the country aired the footage. Commentators called it the Brookhaven testimony. The mayor's staff resigned within days. A formal federal investigation was launched into discriminatory practices in city events and hiring. And in a town once defined by unspoken bias, people began, for the first time, to speak. Outside the courthouse, Aisha stood with Henry as the crowd gathered around her. Tara, the young journalist, approached with tears in her eyes. You did it, she whispered. Aisha shook her head gently. No, we did. The sky broke open with a drizzle, washing the dust off the courthouse steps. Aisha looked up at the gray light, letting it fall across her face. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like truth, clean, hard, and long overdue. Weeks passed, and Brookhaven began to breathe differently. The air felt clearer, lighter somehow, though the scars of what had happened still lingered in the town's rhythm. The courthouse stood quiet again, its steps now empty except for a few stray leaves blown by the wind. But for those who had watched the trial, something in them had shifted. In the small community center on Maple Avenue, the same place where Aisha had once volunteered with teenagers, folding chairs were lined up in rows. A banner hung overhead. Brookhaven together. AF. Aisha stood at the back of the room, watching people file in, veterans, church mothers, students, even the diner owner who once turned away when she passed. They came quietly, uncertain but willing. The mayor was gone now. Having resigned under federal scrutiny, his legacy reduced to scandal headlines. But the town itself, the people, were still here, trying to rebuild something they could believe in. When Aisha took the stage, the crowd rose instinctively. She didn't speak right away. She looked at them, really looked, her gaze gentle but unwavering. I didn't expect to stand here again, she began. I thought once the cameras left, things would fade back to silence. But you all proved me wrong. She paused, glancing toward the front row, where Henry sat with his cane resting across his lap, his eyes full of pride. When all this began, I thought justice was a moment, a verdict, a headline, a decision. But justice isn't a moment. It's a movement. It's every person who decides that silence won't do anymore. Soft applause rippled through the room, cautious at first, then strong. After the event, people lingered, talking, exchanging ideas. A young girl, no older than 16, approached Aisha shyly. "Miss Grant," she said, "my brother's thinking about joining the Air Force. He saw you on TV. He said you made him believe that maybe folks like us could serve and still be respected." Aisha smiled, bending slightly to meet her eyes. "Tell your brother that respect doesn't come from the uniform," she said gently. "It comes from how you carry yourself, even when they try to take your place in line." The girl nodded, eyes bright, before slipping back into the crowd. Later that evening, as the hall emptied and the lights dimmed, Aisha stood alone at the podium. The echoes of voices lingered like ghosts of change. Henry walked up behind her, laying a steady hand on her shoulder. "You did good," he said quietly. Aisha turned, smiling faintly. "We both know it's not over." "It never is," he said, chuckling softly. "But at least now they're listening." Outside, the night air was cool and still. Across the street, the old courthouse loomed under the lamplight, a monument to both failure and transformation. The same building that had once humiliated her now stood as the place where truth was spoken aloud. Tara, the young journalist, waited by her car, camera slung across her shoulder. "You planning on going home anytime soon?" she asked with a grin. Aisha laughed, a quiet, genuine sound that hadn't come easily for months. "Home's not a place anymore," she said. "It's a purpose." As she walked away, her phone buzzed. A message from Dana Lewis. "DC wants to meet. Civil Rights Division's looking into new policies for event inclusion standards. You started something bigger than Brookhaven." Aisha read the text twice, her hand trembling slightly. Not from fear, but from the realization that what began as one woman standing before a velvet rope had become a ripple stretching across the country. She looked up at the stars scattered above the courthouse dome, her mother's voice echoing faintly in memory. "Dignity isn't what they give you, baby. It's what you refuse to let them take." Aisha exhaled slowly, the tension of months unwinding into the night air. Somewhere in the distance, church bells rang, slow, resonant, like a prayer for renewal. She walked toward her car, head high, each step measured, steady, unhurried. Not triumphant, not vengeful, just free. And in the quiet streets of Brookhaven, that freedom, hard-won and undeniable, was the beginning of something new.